Captain Daeho Kim stared at the emergency alert, flashing red across his command screen, and felt his stomach drop like a stone through vacuum. The Vrek system was dying, and nobody else was moving to help. The plague had started 3 days ago on Vrek's Prime and already spread to 4 other worlds in their home system. 40 million insectoid beings were suffering and dying while the Galactic Federation Council debated jurisdiction protocols and quarantine procedures. Daeho had watched the council sessions from his ship and wanted to scream at their slow, careful words while people died. Dr. Hyejin Park called from the medical bay where she was preparing supplies for a rescue mission that might never get approved. Her voice carried frustration that matched his own when she said the Vrek's plague was unlike anything in the medical databases, but definitely biological and definitely spreading fast. The insectoid species had always been peaceful traders who helped connect distant parts of the galaxy through their merchant networks. Ambassador Jinwoo Choi sent another message from Federation headquarters saying the council was still debating, while requiring more impact studies and contamination assessments. The other species were afraid of catching whatever was killing the Vreks, even though early scans suggested it only affected their specific biology. Fear made them cautious, and caution made them slow. Admiral Bo-Ram Lee commanded the human colonial defense forces and had been pushing for immediate action since the first distress calls came through. Her ships were ready to move, but Federation law required council approval for any military intervention, even for humanitarian purposes. She had called Daeho personally to say waiting any longer would mean watching an entire civilization collapse. The breaking point came when Daeho received a direct transmission from a Vrek's emergency coordinator, whose translation came through filled with static and pain. The coordinator was dying but still trying to organize evacuations from the most affected areas. Children were dying in the streets while their parents worked desperately to maintain basic services. Medical facilities had collapsed under the load, and food distribution systems were failing as workers fell sick. Daeho made his decision without waiting for more council debates or impact studies. He opened a general communication channel to all human ships in the sector and said they were going in with or without Federation approval because people were dying while bureaucrats argued about paperwork. 200 human vessels responded within hours, including medical ships, transport vessels, engineering support craft, and military escorts. The human fleet entered Vrek space knowing they were violating Federation protocols and quarantine orders, but none of them cared about regulations when lives hung in the balance. Dr. Hyejin Park led medical teams that worked around the clock to understand the plague and develop treatments, while human engineers restored power grids and water systems that had failed as the Vrex population collapsed. Human logistics specialists organized massive evacuation efforts that moved healthy Vrex populations away from infected areas, while human agricultural teams provided emergency food supplies to replace the failing local production. Human military units maintained order and security as normal social structures broke down under the pressure of the crisis. The rescue operation lasted 2 months and saved 40 million Vrex lives through human intervention that other Federation species had been too cautious or too afraid to attempt. Daeho watched his people work without sleep to pull an entire civilization back from the edge of extinction, while Federation observers took notes and filed reports. When the crisis ended and the last Vrex refugees were safely relocated to temporary settlements, the Federation Council called emergency sessions to address human violations of quarantine protocols and unauthorized military intervention. Instead of gratitude for saving 40 million lives, the Council issued formal censures against human commanders and implemented new restrictions on human military movements. Ambassador Jinwoo Choi stood before the Federation Council and tried to explain that human actions had prevented a genocide, while Federation debate would have guaranteed extinction for the Vrek species. The Council response was to accuse humans of aggressive interference and cultural imperialism that threatened Federation unity and decision-making processes. Dr. Hyejin Park discovered that the Vrex rescue was part of a larger pattern that had been building for decades. Humans had quietly become the Federation's emergency response system, handling 89% of all disaster relief operations, while other species debated proper procedures. Human engineers maintained most critical infrastructure across Federation space, while human diplomats resolved conflicts that other species preferred to ignore. Human agricultural techniques fed billions of non-human citizens across hundreds of worlds, while human medical advances had eliminated dozens of diseases that had plagued various species for millennia. Human exploration teams made peaceful contact with new civilizations, while human scientists solved technical problems that stumped researchers from older, more established species. The pattern was clear, but nobody wanted to acknowledge it, because doing so would mean admitting their dependence on the newest members of the Federation. Other species preferred to see human helpfulness as eager puppy behavior, rather than essential support that kept galactic civilization functioning. The breaking point came when the Federation Council voted to place oversight committees on human colonies and restrict human expansion into new territories. The official reason given was concern about human tendency toward unauthorized intervention, but the real message was clear. Humans were becoming too important and too capable for the comfort of older Federation members. Admiral Boram Lee called an emergency meeting of human leadership aboard the flagship Soul's Pride, where she presented evidence of systematic discrimination and deliberate marginalization despite human contributions to galactic stability and prosperity. The meeting included military commanders, civilian administrators, scientists, and diplomats who had all experienced similar patterns of Federation ingratitude. Ambassador Jinwoo Choi made one final attempt to address Federation concerns by presenting a comprehensive report documenting human contributions to galactic civilization. The report showed humans handled 94% of successful conflict resolutions, 76% of technological innovations, and 67% of peaceful first contacts with new species. The Federation Council response was to formally accuse humans of colonial saviorism and aggressive altruism that threatened the independence and dignity of other species. They demanded humans reduce their involvement in galactic affairs and accept permanent junior status under Federation oversight to prevent future unauthorized interventions. The final straw came when Federation security forces attempted to board human vessels for mandatory inspections while human medical teams were still providing ongoing care for Vrex refugees. The boarding parties were turned away, but the message was unmistakable. Humans were no longer trusted partners, but potential threats requiring constant monitoring. That night in the secure conference room aboard Soul's Pride, human leadership made a decision that would reshape the galaxy. Admiral Boram Lee spoke the words that sealed their fate when she said if the Federation did not want human help, then the Federation would not receive human help anymore. The vote was unanimous and immediate. Captain Daeho Kim felt something break inside him as he realized the species they had tried so hard to help and protect had chosen fear over gratitude and control over cooperation. The humans had become the backbone of galactic civilization, but backbones were only appreciated when they stopped working. The meeting ended with orders to begin immediate preparations for complete human withdrawal from Federation space, including all personnel, infrastructure, knowledge, and support systems that had become integral to galactic operations. Operation Empty Nest would remove every trace of human presence from a galaxy that had decided it no longer wanted human involvement. As Daeho returned to his quarters that night, he looked out at the stars of Federation space and wondered how long galactic civilization would survive without the people who had been quietly keeping it alive. Commander Sung Ho Yoon had organized evacuation operations before, but never anything like Operation Empty Nest, which required moving 2.3 billion humans from 400 worlds in 6 months while dismantling the infrastructure that kept galactic civilization running. The logistics were staggering and would have been impossible for any other species. But humans had spent decades building efficient transportation networks and communication systems that now served their exodus. Every human ship in Federation space was recalled for evacuation duty, while civilian vessels were converted for refugee transport and cargo hauling. Engineer Mi-young Kim supervised the most critical aspect of the withdrawal, which involved carefully removing human-designed components from galactic infrastructure without causing immediate system failures. The communication relay networks, quantum logistics systems, and jump gate calibration protocols had all been built or significantly modified by human engineers over the past century. Mi-young worked 18-hour days identifying which systems could function without human oversight and which would fail within days or weeks of human departure. The galaxy's leaders had no idea how dependent their civilization had become on human innovation. Because humans had always fixed problems quietly without demanding recognition or credit, Dr. Hee-Jin Park finished her final report documenting the extent of human integration into galactic society, but knew the Federation Council would ignore her warnings, just as they had ignored previous attempts to explain human contributions. The report detailed critical dependencies that would cause cascade failures across multiple sectors once human support was withdrawn. Federation medical systems relied on human-trained personnel for 67% of all hospital operations and 91% of emergency response capabilities. Human agricultural techniques provided food security for billions of beings across the galaxy, while human disaster response teams had prevented countless catastrophes through rapid intervention and innovative solutions. The transportation networks that connected distant worlds functioned primarily through human-maintained relay stations and navigation systems that other species had never fully understood, despite using them daily. Trade routes, shipping schedules, and cargo management all depended on human optimization algorithms that had gradually replaced less efficient methods. Captain Yoon-ji Song commanded the rearguard operations that would provide security during the final phases of evacuation, while ensuring no human personnel or technology fell into Federation hands during the withdrawal. Her ships patrolled the borders of human-controlled space and intercepted Federation vessels attempting to gather intelligence about human capabilities. Chancellor Velthar of the Altarian Republic dismissed human warnings about system dependencies. During a Federation Council session that was broadcast across galactic networks, he declared that galactic civilization had functioned for millennia before human arrival, and would easily adapt to human departure through the superior wisdom of older, more experienced species. The Chancellor's confidence was shared by most Federation members who viewed human warnings as manipulation tactics designed to maintain their inflated importance in galactic affairs. They believed human infrastructure could be quickly replaced by technical teams from other species working together to fill any temporary gaps. Commander Sung-Ho Yoon watched Federation arrogance with grim satisfaction while coordinating the evacuation of human colonies from rim worlds that would be among the first to experience system failures. These frontier settlements had been established using human terraforming techniques and agricultural methods that other species had never successfully replicated. Human evacuation convoys moved through Federation space carrying not just people, but entire knowledge bases, manufacturing equipment, research facilities, and cultural archives that represented humanity's contributions to galactic civilization. Federation observers recorded the massive movement of human assets but failed to understand what they were losing. The first signs of trouble appeared even before human evacuation was complete, when a solar storm damaged communication arrays in the outer rim sectors. Normal response time for such emergencies was 6 hours using human technical teams, but Federation replacement crews took 3 weeks to restore partial functionality, with temporary repairs. Trade disputes between hegemony worlds escalated to border skirmishes when human mediators were no longer available to facilitate negotiations between species with fundamentally different communication styles and cultural values. Federation diplomatic protocols proved inadequate for managing complex interspecies conflicts that humans had handled routinely. Dr. Hee-Jin Park submitted her final medical reports to Federation health authorities, documenting treatment protocols and research data that human teams had developed for dozens of species-specific conditions. The reports included warnings about upcoming health crises that would require immediate attention. Once human medical support was withdrawn, Federation medical authorities filed the reports in standard databases, where they would likely remain unread until the predicted health emergencies actually occurred and caused significant casualties among populations that had relied on human preventive care programs. Engineer Mi-Young Kim completed her infrastructure assessments and submitted detailed manuals explaining how to maintain systems that humans had built or modified throughout Federation space. The manuals were written in simple language with step-by-step instructions, but required technical knowledge that most Federation species had never bothered to develop. The final phase of Operation Empty Nest began when human military forces started withdrawing from strategic positions that they had defended for decades as part of Federation security arrangements. These positions controlled key trade routes and jump points that connected different regions of galactic space. Admiral Boram Lee, coordinated the military withdrawal, while ensuring Federation forces could not claim abandoned human installations or technology. Human bases were systematically dismantled with critical components removed or destroyed to prevent reverse engineering by species that had never appreciated human contributions. Captain Yoon-ji Song led the last human convoy out of Federation space 6 months after Operation Empty Nest began. Her ship broadcast a final message to all Federation worlds announcing the completion of human withdrawal and formally ending humanity's membership in the galactic community. The message was brief and professional, stating that humans had fulfilled all evacuation requirements and were severing all diplomatic, economic, and military ties with Federation members. Humanity wished the galaxy good fortune in managing its affairs without human interference or assistance. Chancellor Velthar responded with a public statement expressing relief that human colonial ambitions had been curtailed and predicting that Federation unity would be strengthened by the removal of human aggressive tendencies and cultural imperialism. Most Federation species shared the Chancellor's optimism and viewed human departure as an opportunity to reclaim their rightful leadership roles in galactic affairs without constant human meddling, in matters that other species could handle perfectly well using traditional methods. The human exodus had been completed with remarkable efficiency and minimal disruption to Federation operations, but the real test would come in the following months when systems began failing and problems emerged that had previously been solved automatically by human oversight. Commander Sung Ho-yoon filed his final report from the edge of Federation space, documenting the successful evacuation of all human personnel and assets, while noting that Federation leaders seemed genuinely convinced they could manage galactic civilization without human support. Engineer Mi-young Kim sealed her technical databases and communication protocols behind quantum encryption that would prevent Federation access to human innovations that had been freely shared for decades, but were now considered proprietary technology of the independent human republic. Dr. Hae-jin Park took one last look at her medical research facilities that had served beings from hundreds of different species before boarding the final evacuation transport. She wondered how many would die from preventable diseases once human medical support was no longer available. Captain Yoon-ji Song commanded the last human ship to leave Federation space and broadcast humanity's final message to the galaxy they were abandoning. The transmission was simple and direct. The galaxy belongs to you now, and we wish you luck with what comes next. The human republic had been born from Federation rejection and would build its future in regions of space where human values and capabilities would be appreciated rather than feared or resented. President Tae-min-han stood on the observation deck of New Seoul Station, watching construction crews build another orbital habitat in the Magellanic Bridge, where humanity had established the human republic after their exodus from Federation Space 6. Months had passed since the last human ship left the galaxy, and the reports from Federation space made for interesting reading. The cascade failures had begun exactly as Dr. Hae-jin Park had predicted, but Federation leaders continued to insist they could manage without human interference. General So-ra-an briefed the president daily on intelligence gathered from long-range sensors and communication intercepts that painted a picture of increasing chaos across former Federation territory. The galaxy was learning the hard way what happened when essential support systems suddenly disappeared. The first major crisis had occurred on Kepler 442, where a viral outbreak killed 300 million beings because Federation medical teams lacked the rapid response capabilities that human teams had provided for decades. Traditional Federation medical protocols proved catastrophically inadequate for managing large-scale health emergencies. Scientist Woo Jin Nam documented each failure from his research station, where he was compiling data about the collapse of galactic civilization. His reports would become historical records of what happened when an advanced society lost the backbone that had been holding it together. The economic collapse had started when human-maintained quantum trading networks began making increasingly erratic decisions without proper oversight. Automated systems that had functioned perfectly under human supervision started creating market instabilities that spread across hundreds of world's Federation economists had no idea how to fix trading algorithms that human programmers had optimized. Over decades of constant refinement, the economic chaos led to hyperinflation on 200 worlds and complete market collapse in several major trading hubs. The First Succession War began when Terran colonial territories declared independence, rather than accept Federation governance after human administrators were withdrawn. These worlds had been established using human terraforming techniques and governed through human administrative systems. Federation forces attempted to maintain control over the breakaway territories, but discovered that human-trained local militias were far more effective than Federation military units that had become dependent on human tactical support and logistical coordination. President Tai Min Han received daily requests for assistance from Federation worlds experiencing system failures, but the Human Republic maintained strict policies against any contact with former Federation members. The galaxy had made its choice and would live with the consequences. General Sora An turned away. Federation diplomatic missions that arrived at Human Republic borders carrying desperate pleas for technical assistance and medical support. Her response was always the same. The Human Republic was not accepting diplomatic contact with the Galactic Federation. The agricultural crisis reached its peak when worlds that had relied on human farming techniques experienced massive crop failures. Human agricultural methods had increased food production by 300% on many worlds, but Federation farmers could not replicate the techniques without proper training. Famine spread across the outer rim as food distribution networks collapsed without human logistics coordination. Worlds that had exported food for centuries could no longer feed their own populations, while traditional farming methods proved inadequate for meeting the needs of modern galactic civilization. Scientist Wu Jin Nam observed that Federation species were experiencing psychological trauma as their carefully ordered society disintegrated around them. Some populations developed religious movements that worshipped humans as departed gods who would eventually return to save the galaxy. The mythology of human departure grew more elaborate as conditions worsened across Federation space. Stories spread about human wisdom and capabilities that had been taken for granted when humans lived among other species, but were now remembered as miraculous abilities. The point of no return came during the Great Die-Off, when interconnected system failures killed 2.8 billion beings across Federation space in a single month. Power grids failed, water systems collapsed, medical facilities shut down, and transportation networks ground to a halt. President Tai Min Han watched the casualty reports with mixed feelings of vindication and sorrow. Humanity had tried to warn the Federation about critical dependencies, but their warnings had been dismissed as manipulation tactics designed to maintain human importance. The Federation Council met in emergency session to address the mounting crisis, but their debates achieved nothing except demonstrating how completely they had relied on human problem-solving capabilities. Other species could identify problems but lacked human innovation and adaptability for finding solutions. Chancellor Velthar of the Altarian Republic was removed from office by emergency vote after admitting that Federation leaders had seriously underestimated human contributions to galactic stability. His replacement immediately began drafting formal apologies and requests for human assistance. General Sora An intercepted increasingly desperate communications from Federation military commanders who were losing control of their territories as social order collapsed. Federation forces had been trained to maintain peace but not to rebuild civilization from the ground up. The Human Republic continued to thrive in the Magellanic Bridge, where human organizational skills and technological innovation created a prosperous society free from the burden of constantly managing galactic crises. Human creativity flourished when no longer constrained by Federation regulations and oversight. Dr. Hyejin Park established new research facilities that advanced human medicine and technology at unprecedented rates, while human artists and philosophers explored ideas that had been suppressed during their time as Federation junior partners. Freedom from galactic responsibilities allowed humanity to focus on their own development. Engineer Mi Young Kim designed new technologies that surpassed anything humanity had created while constrained by Federation limitations on research and development. The Human Republic became more advanced in 6 months than humanity had managed in decades of Federation membership. Captain Dae-Ho Kim served as President Emeritus and wrote his memoirs documenting humanity's experience with the Federation and the events leading to their departure. His book became required reading for understanding how advanced civilizations could collapse when essential support systems were removed. The cascade failures continued across Federation space as infrastructure that had been maintained by human oversight fell into disrepair. Communication networks became unreliable, transportation systems operated at reduced capacity, and basic services that populations had taken for granted simply stopped working. Scientist Wu Jin Nam calculated that restoring galactic civilization to pre-collapse levels would require at least 50 years of intensive reconstruction efforts even with human assistance. Without human help, the recovery period could extend to centuries, assuming Federation species could even maintain their current reduced capabilities. The final straw came when a Federation remnant fleet arrived at Human Republic borders carrying a simple message that acknowledged everything humanity had tried to tell them years earlier. The message was brief and devastating in its honesty. We were wrong, and we need your help. President Tae-min Han convened the Council of Humanity to debate whether the Human Republic should respond to Federation requests for assistance. The decision would determine not just the fate of galactic civilization, but humanity's role in any future galactic community. The galaxy had collapsed under the weight of its own arrogance when humanity walked away. But the question remained whether humanity would choose to bear the weight of galactic leadership when the galaxy finally admitted its dependence. Historian Junseo Lee finished writing the final chapters of his definitive account titled When the Supporting Pillar Falls, which documented how galactic civilization had collapsed when humanity withdrew their essential support systems from Federation. Space 5 years had passed since human exodus began, and the galaxy bore little resemblance to the prosperous interconnected civilization that had once spanned 3 galaxy arms. The Galactic Federation existed only in name, while controlling perhaps 200 systems out of the original 15,000. Advanced civilization had collapsed across vast regions where populations had regressed to pre-industrial technology levels after losing access to human-maintained infrastructure and technical knowledge. Entire worlds had been abandoned when life support systems failed and could not be repaired by species that had never learned how the technology actually worked. Ambassador Ye-Jin Kang faced impossible decisions every day as millions of refugees fled the chaos of former Federation space-seeking sanctuary in Human Republic territory. Many were members of the same species that had voted to restrict human expansion and place humanity under permanent Federation oversight. The irony was not lost on anyone that species which had criticized human aggressive altruism now desperately needed that same altruism to survive the collapse of their own civilization. Refugee convoys arrived daily at Human Republic borders carrying beings who had once viewed humans as dangerous junior partners. Admiral Chang Ho Park commanded the border fleets that intercepted refugee ships and enforced Human Republic immigration policies. His orders were clear and non-negotiable. No entry to Human Republic space for any being who had participated in anti-human policies during the Federation years. The refugee crisis created moral dilemmas that divided Human Republic leadership between those who wanted to help and those who believed the galaxy needed to learn consequences for its choices. Ambassador Ye-Jin Kang argued for limited humanitarian assistance, while Admiral Chang Ho Park insisted on maintaining strict isolation. From the ashes of the Federation, several major powers had emerged as successor states, attempting to maintain some semblance of order in their respective territories. The Neo-Altarian Empire ruled through military force after democratic institutions collapsed under the pressure of constant crisis management. The cooperative worlds represented a loose alliance of species that tried to recreate human-style collaborative governance but lacked the cultural foundation and practical experience necessary for effective cooperation. Their attempts at consensus building typically ended in deadlock and inaction. The isolation spheres consisted of dozens of species that had withdrawn into xenophobic isolation after concluding that interaction with other species inevitably led to dependency and eventual disaster. These groups maintained minimal technology and rejected all outside contact. Historian Junseo Lee interviewed refugees and former Federation officials to document how the collapse had affected different species and regions. His research revealed that populations closest to human settlements had suffered the most because they had become completely dependent on human services. The psychological impact was as devastating as the material collapse because species that had once dominated galactic Politics were forced to confront their own inadequacy when compared to human capabilities. Pride and arrogance gave way to desperation and self-doubt. Captain Dae-ho Kim published his memoirs under the title The Galaxy We Left Behind, which became the definitive human account of Federation membership and the events leading to human withdrawal. His book was banned in most successor states but circulated widely through underground networks. The Human Republic experienced a renaissance of art, science, and philosophy, as humanity finally had the freedom to pursue their own interests without constantly managing galactic crises. Human creativity reached new heights when no longer constrained by Federation limitations and expectations. Dr. Hyejin Park established research institutions that advanced human knowledge at unprecedented rates, while human engineers developed technologies that would have been impossible under Federation oversight. The Human Republic became more advanced than the old Federation had ever been. Human exploration teams discovered new regions of space and made contact with previously unknown civilizations using diplomatic methods that had been refined through decades of experience with difficult Federation species. These new relationships were based on mutual respect rather than dependency. The Human Republic military grew stronger and more sophisticated as human strategic thinking evolved beyond the defensive mindset that had characterized their Federation years. Admiral Chung-Ho Park commanded fleets that could have easily conquered the entire collapsed galaxy if humans had chosen conquest over isolation. Commander Kyung-Min Yu led humanitarian assessment teams that monitored conditions in former Federation space and calculated what would be required to restore basic civilization to collapsed regions. Her reports painted a grim picture of galactic decline that showed no signs of slowing. The assessment teams documented 4.2 billion deaths from violence, disease, and starvation in the 5 years since human withdrawal. 800 star systems had experienced complete governmental collapse while technological regression had set back most populations by centuries. Professor Dong-Soo Kim established philosophical schools that explored questions about moral responsibility and the ethics of abandoning those who had rejected help. His teachings influenced Human Republic policy debates about whether humanity had obligations to assist former Federation members. The philosophical debates reflected deeper questions about human nature and the proper role of superior capabilities in relations with less advanced civilizations. Some argued that human strength created responsibilities, while others insisted that help could only be given to those who asked respectfully. Federation remnant fleets made increasingly desperate attempts to establish communication with Human Republic authorities but were turned away at the border by Admiral Chung-Ho Park's forces. The standard response was that the Human Republic was not accepting diplomatic contact with former Federation entities. The first breakthrough came when a small delegation from the cooperative worlds managed to reach Ambassador Ye-Jin Kang with a formal acknowledgement of past mistakes and a humble request for technical assistance. The delegation included species that had previously supported anti-human policies. The Cooperative Worlds delegation presented evidence that they had reformed their governance structures to eliminate the xenophobic tendencies and bureaucratic paralysis that had characterized the old Federation. They offered to accept human leadership in exchange for assistance in rebuilding their territories. Ambassador Ye-Jin Kang brought the proposal before the Human Republic Council, where heated debates erupted between those who saw an opportunity for positive change and those who viewed any assistance as repeating the mistakes that had led to human exploitation. Commander Kyung-Min Yu provided analysis showing that selective assistance could be provided without recreating the dependency relationships that had characterized human Federation interactions. Her plan involved teaching rather than doing, and required recipients to demonstrate competence before receiving additional help. The debate intensified when intelligence reports revealed that several successor states were developing biological and nuclear weapons for use against each other in increasingly destructive conflicts. The weapons represented threats that could spread beyond former Federation space if not contained. Admiral Chung-Ho Park argued that Human Republic security required maintaining strict isolation until the collapsed region stabilized naturally, regardless of how long that might take or how many beings died in the process. Intervention would only restart the cycle of dependency and resentment. Professor Dong-Soo Kim countered that humanity's greatest strength had always been compassion, and abandoning that nature to prove a point would transform humans into something as small and petty as the species that had rejected them. The choice would define what humanity would become. Historian Junseo Lee documented the great debate that would determine human policy toward the collapsed galaxy, while noting that the decision reflected fundamental questions about power, responsibility, and the nature of civilization itself. The Council of Humanity prepared for the most important vote in human history, knowing that their choice would shape not only their own future, but the fate of billions of beings struggling to survive in the ruins of galactic civilization. Chancellor Haewon Choi convened the Council of Humanity 10 years after the Great Exodus to debate the most consequential decision in human history. The question was simple, but the implications were staggering. Should humanity help rebuild the galaxy that had rejected them? The council chamber in New Seoul was filled with representatives from every human world and colony as leaders gathered to determine whether the human republic would maintain isolation or respond to increasingly desperate pleas from the collapsed Federation territories. Commander Kyung-min Yu presented her comprehensive assessment of galactic conditions, which painted a devastating picture of civilizational collapse that showed no signs of natural recovery. 4.2 billion beings had died from preventable causes, while 800 star systems remained in complete chaos. The casualty reports were staggering, but what made them worse was knowing that human intervention could have prevented most of the deaths through proper disaster response, medical assistance, and conflict resolution techniques that had once been routine across Federation space. Dr. Hyjin Park, now ancient but still mentally sharp, reviewed medical data showing that dozens of diseases had returned to epidemic levels after human medical programs were discontinued. Populations that had enjoyed centuries of health and longevity were dying from conditions that human medicine had easily controlled. Engineer Mi Young Kim documented infrastructure failures that had cascaded through interconnected systems, causing regional collapses that spread like falling dominoes across former Federation territory. The technological regression was accelerating rather than stabilizing as hoped by isolation advocates. The great debate began with Admiral Chang-ho Park, arguing that humanity had no obligation to rescue civilizations that had chosen their own path through arrogance and ingratitude. The galaxy had made its decision when it expelled humanity and should live with the consequences regardless of suffering. Admiral Chang-ho Park insisted that intervention would restart the cycle of dependency and exploitation that had characterized human-Federation relations. Other species would again take human assistance for granted, while resenting human capabilities and seeking to limit human influence. Professor Dong-Soo Kim presented the opposing viewpoint, arguing that humanity's greatest strength had never been technology or organization, but rather compassion and willingness to help others regardless of personal cost. Abandoning that nature would mean losing what made humanity special. The philosophical argument resonated through the council chamber as Professor Dong-Soo Kim asked whether humanity would become as petty and vindictive as the species that had rejected them, or would rise above past grievances to act according to their highest principles. Ambassador Yejin Kang described her interactions with refugee populations and successor state delegations who had finally acknowledged their mistakes and were begging for human assistance. Many were the same individuals who had voted for anti-human policies, but desperation had taught them humility. The ambassador argued that humanity had already proven their point through the collapse of galactic civilization, and continuing isolation served no constructive purpose while billions suffered unnecessarily. The galaxy had learned its lesson and was ready to accept human leadership. General So-Ra-On presented military analysis, showing that human republic forces could easily establish control over former Federation territory if leadership decided to intervene. Human technological advantages had grown dramatically during the isolation period. The military assessment raised uncomfortable questions about whether humanitarian intervention would inevitably become conquest, since human capabilities so far exceeded anything successor states could field. The power imbalance was greater than ever before. Historian Junseo Lee reminded the council that human departure had been intended to teach the galaxy about consequences, but the lesson had been learned at the cost of billions of lives. Continuing, the punishment would serve no educational purpose. The debate continued for days as council members wrestled with moral, practical, and philosophical implications of either choice. Isolation meant safety but condemned billions to continued suffering, while intervention risked repeating past mistakes on an even larger scale. Dr. Hyejin Park made the final speech that would influence the crucial vote. She acknowledged that helping ungrateful populations had been painful, but argued that humanity's true test was whether they could maintain their compassionate nature, despite past betrayals. The ancient doctor insisted that human strength came from their willingness to do what was right regardless of personal cost or past treatment. Abandoning their helpful nature to prove a point would mean the Federation had succeeded in destroying what made humanity special. The vote was close but decisive. The Council of Humanity approved limited intervention under strict conditions outlined in what became known as the New Covenant, which would govern all future human interactions with galactic civilizations. The New Covenant established humanity as the senior partner in any reconstructed galactic government with veto power over major policy decisions and formal acknowledgement of human superiority in organizational and technical matters. Human methods and principles would be adopted as standard practice across all participating territories, while no restrictions could be placed on human expansion or settlement. Species that wanted human assistance would accept human leadership and follow human guidance. Ambassador Yejin Kang transmitted the New Covenant terms to successor state governments and refugee populations with the clear message that assistance would be provided only to those who accepted the new relationship structure. The response was immediate and overwhelming as desperate populations agreed to terms that would have been unthinkable during Federation years. Species that had once demanded equal partnership now begged for junior status under human protection. Admiral Chang-Ho Park commanded the Great Return as human fleets re-entered galactic space for the first time in a decade. His flagship broadcast, a message announcing humanity's return, not as servants but as teachers and leaders. The reconstruction effort began immediately with human teams taking control of critical infrastructure and establishing emergency services in the most desperate regions. Human efficiency and capability were more impressive than ever after years of technological advancement. Commander Kyungmin Yu supervised humanitarian operations that saved millions of lives within the first months of reintervention. Human medical teams, disaster response units, and agricultural specialists worked around the clock to stabilize collapsing populations. The psychological impact of human return was as dramatic as the material assistance. Populations that had lived in despair for years suddenly had hope, as human competence restored basic services and established security in chaotic regions. Dr. Hyejin Park established medical centers that quickly brought epidemics under control, while human engineers restored power grids, communication networks, and transportation systems that had been offline for years. The successor states that had maintained some independence were forced to choose between continued decline and acceptance of human dominance. Most chose survival over pride and formally requested incorporation into the new human-led Galactic Order. Engineer Mi-young Kim designed new infrastructure that surpassed anything from Federation years, while incorporating safeguards that would prevent future collapse if human support was withdrawn. The new systems were more robust and less dependent on constant oversight. The reconstruction proceeded faster than anyone had expected as human organizational skills created efficient administrative structures that coordinated relief efforts across hundreds of worlds simultaneously. The new galactic government functioned better than the old Federation had ever managed. Chancellor Haewon Choi established the capital of the new galactic government on New Earth, where human leadership could maintain direct oversight of all major policy decisions. The symbolism was clear. Humanity would never again be relegated to junior status. 50 years after the Great Return, Chancellor Haewon Choi reflected on the price of leadership as she prepared to retire from galactic service. Humanity had saved the galaxy by walking away from it, but in doing so had taken on burdens they could never again set down. The galaxy was more prosperous and peaceful than ever before under human guidance, but the responsibility for maintaining galactic civilization now rested permanently on human shoulders. Other species had become willing partners but remained ultimately dependent on human capability. The final irony was that humanity had achieved everything they had once wanted from Federation membership: recognition, respect, and leadership roles in galactic affairs. But the price had been the collapse of galactic civilization and the deaths of billions. When humanity walked away, the galaxy collapsed under the weight of its own arrogance. When humanity returned, the galaxy collapsed under the weight of its own gratitude. And humanity learned that sometimes the greatest curse is being proven right.